Okay, so we were going to talk about something that we left off with on the last show,
That's right.
which was, I don't know what title we would give to something like this, but what would you call it?
Maybe reproduction, or like the sense of urgency in life.
The deceptive nature of nature, I would
Perfect.
say. Okay, so
you've got some opinions about this, and you did
Yeah.
touch on it on the last podcast, which was
Right.
titled Communication, Episode 2.
yeah, because it's such a lengthy topic.
Yeah, I said no. We've got to do a separate podcast for this because it's so interesting and maybe
Yeah.
controversial.
Definitely. And it was definitely an observation. So it's not something I learned or picked up from anywhere, but I've heard things to, I don't want to say confirm it, but obviously there's people that are thinking along those lines.
Not many people.
But I remember realising it in myself, you know? And I suppose, how did that start? I remember, I guess it all started with just when I began to notice the level of suffering that was in the world and how insignificant we seemed in the grand scheme of things. Namely, I was thinking about anxiety and the function that it served. And what disturbed me with that was I always used to think in terms of black and white. Healthy, sick, should be, should not be, good, bad, you know? And when I realised that anxiety actually served a purpose, which obviously it does, which is to protect us, it made sense why we would have it. And that kind of blurred the lines a little bit between black and white. Because I thought, well, it's essential and necessary. But at the same time, for some people, it's so horrific, right? But it could ultimately save their life.
It gets out of control at some points.
Yeah. But it was like, well, like in evolutionary terms, it doesn't really matter if you're suffering like hell, as long as you're just ticking over and you're alive and you can reproduce, which sometimes anxiety can make people, you know, reproduce like crazy. They go out to, you know, clubs and prostitutes, whatever, you know, they have like a hypersexuality because of it. So in that sense, that's even more sinister. It makes somebody even more sexualized. But being aware of the fact that nature seemed so indifferent to the feelings of the individual and their well-being really disturbed me.
So you think it was careless? It's more like, as long as you're surviving and you wake up the next day alive,
Yes.
you can be addicted to drugs.
Even if you're
And
in
it's
hell.
like, yeah, it doesn't matter.
No.
As long as you just keep breathing, because you've got that chance to
Yeah.
pass on your seed.
And so I remember having a dream about, I was in a laboratory with Dana Scully from the X-Files. You remember her?
Yeah?
Gillian Anderson, I think her name was. And she was wearing the lab coat, doing some stuff with test tubes. And I said to her in the dream, it was something like, why is nature so brutal? Why is it so uncaring and so indifferent? And she looked at me and she was thinking for a second. And then she carried on with her work. But I could see that it was a question that really bothered her, and it was something that she was aware of but didn't want to talk about.
Something that shouldn't be asked.
Yeah, but she was fully aware of it. Now, obviously, there's different ways to think about this and explain it, but this was my thinking a few years ago. It was the awareness of the brutality of nature itself. And so then I just started thinking about why we're attracted to each other. This is the trouble. You become cynical of absolutely everything. But to cut a long story short, I was thinking about the role of the sex drive and lust and reproduction. And I came to the conclusion that, to put it in a term, because the orgasm exists, life sucks. And people are like, what? On the surface, I don't understand that. But my way of thinking was that nature, or God, whatever you want to call it, obviously had to construct the orgasm, right? In order to make us reproduce.
Something to entice us to
Something
make
to
that
entice
move.
us. Now, I know there are some people who would still reproduce even if it didn't exist. We know that. People who would really want a family and they'd want children. But just imagine that in order to reproduce, you just had to do something very simple like join hands for 5 seconds and it was done, right? There was no feeling. It was just this little ritual. There's probably not enough people that would reproduce to keep the species going. So the point I'm making is, yes, there's still people that would reproduce, but in order to really keep things going, nature had to come up with like the ultimate conjuring trick. And that's what it seems to me to be. Because if you want a child to do something, very often it's not the right way to do it, but you can entice them with candy and they'll do it. There's a little reward for them. Or if you've got a job and you say, I make £250,000 a year, I know that's probably not a very easy job that you've got, right? Because the trade-off is quite significant. Maybe you're working for Alan Sugar, and then that wouldn't be enough money. That's another topic, but you get the point I'm making. So I think if you look at the orgasm and what it is, nature has constructed this absolute, ultimate, it's just bliss. It's the most captivating, powerful, dominant force, it seems, in the universe.
Like ultimate pleasure.
Experientially, it's just like, yeah. And you think, why did it have to construct something of that magnitude? Because if it didn't, not enough people would reproduce. Why wouldn't they reproduce? Well, just look around you. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? So the fact that nature... Well, because of the suffering that's innate to life.
But other animals, well, I don't know if they experience the orgasm and they don't mate for pleasure. I know other animals will just do it to reproduce. I think it's because of our conscious minds. And it's like we're so easily distracted. It's like, no, you need to keep your focus on reproduction. So,
interesting way to think about it. And that could be right. But I'm just thinking when you piece it all together, and the amount of people that say, oh, I didn't plan this kid, it kind of just happened. And I'm thinking, well, basically nature succeeded in you. That's what happened. You didn't plan it, but you got so carried away in that moment, in that lovemaking. And that is the trade-off. In that moment, it's like you are taking on board. It's all going into the package it's giving you. Everything you have to take on board. All the suffering of life. The fact that your life is, assuming you stay with the person and raise the child, is pretty much over at that point. Your life is going to change significantly. You have decided to carry this on in another little version of yourself. People aren't just going to do that willy-nilly, So it's come up with the ultimate package to reward you for doing that. And I think, why has it had to do that? Is that not surely good evidence that life is brutal enough that without that you would not partake in that?
But it's still hard work, though. I mean, look at birds and they got to display like these patterns to entice another bird.
Yeah.
And
peacocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's got their own little dance, their own like mating call.
But they don't even think about it. They're kind of just doing it, aren't they?
Yeah, it's just like eating. It's part of life. It's a natural part of life. So having sex as humans, that is also a natural part of life.
Yeah.
I think it's going to happen either way.
But it has to happen in such a way that you're almost sleptwalk into it. Because once you become conscious and you say, holy shit, look at this process I'm acting out, and you can kind of transcend it, which is quite unique as a human being. But if you don't sort of go too deeply, you'll probably just go along with it naturally. That's what, in the same way that you would eat food, you would just do that, wouldn't you? And people don't really think about it. But it's had to construct this awesome conjuring trick in order to get people to do that. And maybe the fact that I think about it like a trick is somewhat revealing of my mindset. I don't know. But I'm kind of cynical about it, Or at least I was more so then. Because obviously it's a great joy as well. But the point is, it's like, why are you offering me $1 million? What exactly do you want me to do for that? Because you don't just offer me $1 million for nothing. And it's like, look at what lovemaking is, It's like, why are you offering me this? And then you go, right, that's why.
I suppose it is kind of like a trick. And a lot of people accidentally sometimes fall for the trick and they have unwanted children.
Yeah.
So maybe the trick's too good.
Yeah. You could get, I don't know. You could get cancer at 10 years old. That's going to be absolutely devastating. The amount of suffering a person can experience in their lifetime is immense. And you have to just put that out of your mind and partake in that experience in order to be able to go along with that. Because if you stop and you start thinking about it and scratching your head, you might think, actually, you know what? Maybe this isn't such a good idea. But then it's like, have some of this, and you're like, yeah, okay, You get that's the point I was making with that. I could be completely wrong. I don't know.
Well, it's just opinion.
Depends on your worldview. Now, if I came at it with like more of a theistic approach, I could explain that in an entirely different way. It's like, the lovemaking process is there's a spark of divinity in us, and we're partaking in the divine nature when we do that. And I could totally understand that as well, and that makes sense.
Well, which is more of a positive perspective.
Absolutely. This is more of a reductionist approach. I'm not even sure if it is my approach these days. I tend to lean towards that.
But it was a theory you came across once, or an opinion that you had once, but you think it might have evolved from that?
Yeah, because I'm still not sure of the universe that I inhabit. And that would change it, obviously. It would change the nature of lovemaking completely if you know, for example, if the God of the Bible exists, it changes absolutely everything.
How so?
Well, because we're made in the image of God, and to live life and experience life and appreciate life and to have children are gifts from God. It would be the purpose, like the purpose of the cup is to hold the fluid. We would have that innate purpose. It would be an objective purpose. I
think most people would fall into that opinion.
Absolutely, and this is one of the things that theists often bring up in arguments. They're saying, even though you don't believe in God, you are demonstrating that you are an image bearer of God by the way in which you live your life. You are enjoying those blessings of God without acknowledging and without thanking God.
Yeah.
That just makes perfect sense. It's like, what a joy this is.
Like the miracle of life.
Yeah. But if you take the reductionist approach, that it's all just, you are the accidental byproduct of nature, you are no more significant than a piece of dust, it's like, well, then nature's constructed this horrible thing just to keep itself going, then there's no ultimate purpose to it, it's just ultimately meaningless. It does become a bit dim and, dull.
I see what you mean, yeah.
So again, it does depend on your worldview, and this was probably when I was about 25 when I started to think like this. Which in a way I was quite depressed at the time, and I was becoming cynical at life and cynical at God, you could say, if you could just use a metaphor, God being the nature and the reality that we experience. You're becoming cynical at that and holding two fingers up to that and saying, no, F you, I'm not going to go along with this, I'm going to transcend this, and I'm not going to play your little game,
Yeah, it's like rebellious.
I
think a lot of people do go through stages like that, especially in our 20s and late teens, where we are growing, we're changing, and we do go through more maybe anxious parts of our life and more depressive times.
Yeah.
But it's worth, I think, this, discovering or venturing through, these different opinions, different thoughts.
Yeah.
But some people will choose not to have children.
Yeah.
Like they'll make that choice. I don't want children. Or do they really? Or are they just giving up?
That's
it could be one or the other. Because I haven't got children.
No.
I might have children.
Yeah.
I'm not against having children. I don't know. I have sometimes accepted, okay, I'm not going to have children, probably, because I won't meet somebody that we end up having children together.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I'm open for it. That's not like me saying, hey, if anyone's listening. No.
I said on the last episode, actually, and this was a bit controversial for me to do it, but it's really how I feel about it. I've always quite liked people that decide not to have children. Not people who just don't, but those who have made a conscious choice not to have children.
I think you do see it as like admirable.
It's like they've transcended the animal, and there's something in that I do think is admirable. But of course, I don't condemn those that do have children. It's how could you? It'd be like condemning somebody for eating. But somebody did say once, I wish I could remember the names of the people that quote these sayings. It was something like, if nature wasn't so deceptive and reproduction wasn't so deceptive, the whole process, then you could argue that having children is the greatest criminal act one could commit. I completely understand that. It's like, what have you done? What have you just brought me into? I had absolutely no say in this at all, which I couldn't because I didn't exist. It's the only way you can do it, I suppose.
I think some children go through that stage, definitely, as teenagers.
You are assuming that this person is going to be glad that you had them, and that's not always the case. And some people say, you know what, life's really tough, I've had enough, and I'm going to kill myself. And they do that quite rationally. And it's one thing that annoys me, actually, about the mental health system and the modern way of thinking amongst doctors and psychiatrists and police officers. They assume that whenever somebody says, I want to die, that there's something wrong with them. And sometimes there is, right? And you have to stop them, because you would assume that when they come to, they're going to thank you for stopping them. They're going to say, thank you, I'm so glad you stopped me, I want to live. But the idea that somebody who is perfectly sane and rational deciding to end their life, I think, frightens those people, because they think, well, there's somebody who's perfectly rational that wants to die. So that is showing me the possibility that maybe life isn't easy, and some people can die, and that's okay. But the protection mechanism is like, no, there's something wrong with you, because if you were sane, everybody would want to live. But that different view is frightening for them, and they kind of have to band together and hold that position. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We're programmed to stay alive no matter what.
Safety in numbers.
As long as we can. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at it.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean he's insane because he wants to kill himself.
But it is a scary.
Maybe you're just too frightened to acknowledge that that's a rational thing to do, because then it would challenge your own pathetic, pointless existence that you're trying to hang on to. Maybe, I don't know. No, I was going to say something about people who have chosen not to have children. There's a mistake sometimes when somebody says, "Do you want children?" And it's not just a yes or no, right? It's not like you either do or you don't. Because in my case, it's not that I don't want children. Instinctively, I would love children. I love children so much, and I have that natural urge. I don't like the word urge, but you know what I mean. Like, I want to have children. It feels so natural.
Why don't you like the word urge, just quickly?
Urge, it just kind of implies like something sinister and unholy, doesn't it? I had an urge to go and, I don't know.
And you're trying to fight the urge, you're trying to fight something which is like evil.
Yeah, or really compelling. But I would love children, but I've made a choice, at least for now, not to. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't want children. I do. It's just that I'm refraining from that process because I don't think it would be the right thing to do. But that's not me not wanting children. That's me refraining from having children. If I did what I wanted to do, I'd probably have them.
So is that contradictory, though? Because say it's like you're refraining from being like a biological monster. Right?
Yeah, yes, and from inflicting suffering on children. If they were to say to me, "Why did you have me?" I don't think I could give them a sufficient answer that would justify their existence. Not at the moment.
But that would just be a moment that they say that. Like people just being spiteful and, again, touching on the, like, say, suicidal people, it's just when some people are feeling low. It's not a constant state.
Yeah, but it is for some people. It really is. I get what you're saying, and you're probably right in most cases. But for some people, it really is. I need to know why the hell I exist in this place of insanity. Why did you have me? And just saying, well, we were just doing what nature programmed us to do does not help. So, yeah, it's not like he just doesn't want children. Maybe the person really does, but they've decided it's for the best that they don't, for whatever the reason. But that's not doing what they want. That's doing what they don't want for the greater good. Do you see the point I'm saying? But people can misconstrue that and make out that you've had them because that's what you want to do. Well, no. I would quite like to have them, but at the moment I don't think it's wise.
So it's a natural urge, again using that word,
to have children.
Yeah.
Of course. Look at it in nature. Acorns dropping off trees, mould growing in the bloody fridge. That process is just going on everywhere, isn't it? Just automatically.
So life is just being all the time, and it's like forward life as much as we can all the time.
Death, rebirth. It's that constant flourishing, and
which is right. I mean, even the planet, even the solar system, the universe is doing that.
Yeah.
Suns die and whatever happens.
So to go against that is, in a sense, the ultimate act of rebellion, isn't it? You really are acting in defiance when you do that. If you just observe nature, when you no longer go along the lines of nature.
Maybe how you're thinking now is natural, because there are maybe a lot of people on the planet, maybe too many, that nature intended. So there's some people being born that saying, hang on, I don't want to do this, let's put a halt to this. Then that's nature balancing itself out again. Which
is why some people say there's homosexuals.
Which is you being a product of nature.
Or it could be it's a remarkably intelligent process and it doesn't want me in the gene pool, which would make sense.
Well, that's what it's making a conscious decision. I don't want this guy.
It's not, but then if we think of it in terms of genetic quality, I don't think there's a lot of evidence to support that theory when you look at the gene pool. Nature doesn't seem to be too picky, but it's one possible way to look at it, isn't it?
It's something beyond, I think, our thinking. Yeah. Which a lot of this is. A lot of consciousness is, I think we're only aware of like a small fraction of ourselves. A lot of it's going on somewhere else.
Yeah. And then if you take the reductionist view, we're not even free agents anyway. There is no free will. It's all biologically predetermined, which would be like the Richard Dawkins stance on it. Because he himself says, I think, he cannot hold to the view of free will. It's just his worldview would not permit him to believe in something like free will, but we certainly feel like we have it. So if that were true, people aren't making choices anyway. You simply have a bunch of chemicals fizzing and acting away, and you are essentially like the puppet. You're just on the roller coaster acting that out. You feel like you're making the choices, but just think, the next thought that comes into your head, you have no control over that. It seems to just come into your head. So maybe we're not even free, but I suspect that we are. But
a lot of people would be defensive against that.
Of course they would. But that's what their brain fizz would make them do, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's interesting why they're defensive.
Yeah.
It's almost, is it because it's the truth, or is it because it's not normally talked about, it's controversial? So it's like, no, I am in control. Of course, we're going to be programmed to think we're in control. We have to. Again, you're saying that's our chemistry.
Do you
we
remember
need to feel that we're in control.
I mean, just for the record, I think we are, because remember that scene in The Matrix where he meets the architect and he sees all his predecessors on those little screens, and they all shout out at the same moment and respond the same way, and it's kind of like, of course you're going to rebel against the idea that you're not free. And I think we are, but I'm simply saying that in a reductionist worldview, you cannot account for that. If you're truly honest, if there's no ghost in the machine, you are simply just an accumulation of biology and chemicals and atoms, however you want to look at it. You're fizzing away. And if you got a bottle of Dr. Pepper and a bottle of Coca-Cola and said, who's winning the debate, well, they're not. They're just fizzing. And so if you reduce everything down like that, we're not thinking. We just have there's the illusion of thinking and making choices. I don't know if that's true. I hope it's not true, but
I think you made a great point, man. There anyway, with the Coke and the Dr. Pepper.
If you just reduce everything down to chemicals. But no, I do happen to think there is a little bit more to us, and so we do make choices. But of course, if we weren't, how would we know it? If you were biologically determined and you had the illusion of free will, well, of course you're going to feel like you're making choices. So, of course, nobody really knows. But I think if you look at a lot of, modern neuroscience now, and all kinds of scientists are saying that, Sam Harris is one, if you look him up, fascinating guy. I think neuroscientist and philosopher. He says that there's no free will, and at some point we're going to have to come to terms with the fact that we are not free. But the implications that would have just in society and on the legal system itself would just be phenomenal. Because
do you think that's depressive?
Absolutely,
I think it would make a lot of people depressed.
Absolutely.
But I was just thinking, like, during the whole of that, I've been thinking, it's not negative though, is it? It's just acceptance and being like, cool, whatever, let's continue anyway, because it doesn't matter. The truth is there anyway.
I suppose that's one of the positive implications of nihilism is, well, nothing matters, and the fact that nothing matters doesn't matter. So yeah,
I think we're just going to enjoy the ride anyway. Like, it's not going to matter too much because we've got these programs, these chemical reactions anyway.
Listen to the discussion by Richard Dawkins and Ricky Gervais. Now, I'm not really a proponent of them in any philosophical or intellectual sense, but it's fascinating because Dawkins is a very smart guy, and they talk about this issue and basically say what you said, that even if I'm not free, I feel like I am, and what else can we do about it? But there's a good rebuttal by Dr. William Lane Craig on that, where he just basically tears into them and says something along the lines of, well, of course it matters if we're free. It's absolutely fundamental to our well-being if we're free thinking agents and we're not just biologically determined. But hey, if we are, it's not that we can do anything about it.
Say it was proven. Say it was proven knowledge, it was on the news, it came out that we're not free.
Yeah.
We're just biological chemical reactions.
Yeah.
Would that change a lot of things?
I don't know. I mean, again, it would be a difficult thing to prove.
I think it would just be an argument for a bit, and then it would fade away like any news story, and then it would just carry on as normal life.
It would be like, it would be like, how would you prove? There's no way, that's a hypothetical, but assuming you could do that, people might well carry on, but you'd have to prove that there was essentially no ghost in the machine. So it'd be like trying to prove God. And I often say, well, what kind of evidence would you expect for a transcendent being, for goodness sake, a being that transcends space and time? What evidence in the material universe would you expect to see? It's not something you can put into a laboratory. So, but assuming you could, I wonder how people would react. Maybe some would react with panic, and others would be like, "Hey man, I don't care. I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing." And I think it would make me uncomfortable. And the prospect of it does make me uncomfortable.
I think, in certain points of life, if I was thinking on my own, I think at lower points it would make you feel a bit worse.
Yeah.
You'd be like, okay, well, I'm supposed to feel like this then. Yeah. I can see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be like...
But even that, you're supposed to be thinking that, aren't you?
Yeah, so I'm supposed to be aware of my depression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, that's a bit awful.
It's frightening though, because Sam Harris did a little experiment on this to try to demonstrate it, and I remember him saying that just close your eyes and just sit there and think, and the thoughts that come into your mind, you have absolutely no control over those. Perhaps you can control how you respond to those, but the thoughts that come in, you have no control over that. And if what you do is determined by those thoughts that come into your head, like I'm going to think about an elephant, well, that would require me to have thought about that before I thought about it. You know what I'm saying? But it kind of just happened. It just, boom, out of nowhere, there it was. And it is a difficult thing to grasp.
Very difficult, yeah. I'm trying my best.
But in which case, it reduces absolutely everything to absurdity, because to try to argue a point or to tell somebody that they're wrong on a particular issue, the theist would respond with, well, that's just what your brain fizz made you believe, and this is what my brain fizz made me believe. Why are you trying to convince me otherwise?
Jim, what about people that say are enthusiastic and they're like, okay, I want to do this in life, and they've got a certain passion, they want to go in this direction.
Yeah.
And not everybody wants to go in the same direction.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to build houses. Somebody wants to, protest or, speak the word of God or something. Everyone's got their own passion, right?
Yeah.
So what's that? That's not just like, okay, reproduce, eat.
No.
It's that's something else. That's creativity. That's why I think there's something small. It's something special.
Like a collective unconscious.
Yeah, I think there's
coming out in all of us, and we're all ultimately going towards a goal of some sort, or we're acting that out.
Collectively, we're just one big animal, I suppose.
Yeah,
we're one big machine collectively.
Yeah.
So we've all got our own special part in that.
Yeah.
So I think what drives people, that's your own little job in your life. That's what passion is. That's what enthusiasm is, I think.
Yeah.
And I think we're all connected to something greater beyond space and time, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is amazing. And that kind of defies... Oh, actually, it links in to maybe the whole biological forces going on.
And the way in which that's happening is in every individual. I have thought a lot about this, and it does make some sense to me.
So it's like the point of life isn't to prove the point of life.
No.
The point of life is just follow your heart.
Just
go for it.
Yeah.
Whatever is pushing you. And it could be, it will be for a few people, is to understand the point of life, but not everybody.
It kind of reminds me of the bees. They're not really thinking about what they're doing, are they? Presumably. They're just like little programmed machines. And look at what they're doing, though. They're all partaking in this amazing process instinctively. And that is kind of like driving the bees to do that collectively. You know what I mean? We've got to go out and get all this bloody pollen and nectar and, bring it back to the queen and all this.
Suppose there's banks of bees.
There's like a divine will that they're acting out. And it could be like we're engaged in a similar process of learning and awakening and discovering and figuring things out about ourselves.
It's that word discovery, man.
Yeah.
Curiosity. We're naturally curious animals. And there's a reason for that.
And they're doing what they're doing, right? And the ants are doing what they're doing. And we're kind of doing what we're doing. So if you think along those lines, we're engaged in a similar process of just... there seems to be like a collective will.
I completely agree.
And that is just... I was thinking about this last night, and I was thinking that is almost too much to bear. How much knowledge do I want of that? This is enough for me at the moment.
You think it's too overwhelming.
I was like, absolutely. But then again, if it's true, I want it. I want to embrace it. So tell me. But That's really profound, isn't it? That would be the
excellent.
case. It really is.
I don't see any other way. We're
Well,
all collectively moving forward in some certain direction, but maybe we're not even supposed to be aware of this, because it'd be that's too distracting. It's always like you having a boss. We can't be a boss of everyone's life. Like, you're not doing your part.
That reminds me of I recently bought that game Detroit Become Human, about the androids. And what's the term for the ones who sort of become like self-aware and don't want to do it anymore? It's a really good game if you get to play it, but they call them something like rebels or something like that. And
I see. Yeah, so instead of joining in the collective consciousness moving forward, they're deciding to rebel and be like, no.
It's like, you're not supposed to start doing this,
I think that's fine. Obviously everybody's free, right? Is that like an example of everybody being free?
We'll assume so for the duration of this show.
Yeah, it's endless talking.
But yeah, I mean,
that's a good example, isn't it? So say we talk about collective consciousness, and everyone's got their own small, actually massive role to play in the forwardness of human beings, discovery and moving away from the planet Earth, exploring space and time. Yeah. Philosophically and physically. But then some people don't want to do that.
So it's a bit of both. It could be
that that's their choice.
It's like
and that wouldn't be productive if they didn't join in. Like say I did nothing for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Say I did like nothing. I just went to work and came home. Went to work, came home.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, like, that's not biologically good for nature's not. It's that's not productive. That's not progressive.
Not good for you
collectively. Right?
Not good for you or anything else, really, is it?
But still, I mean, I don't know. Have people got an urge? I think surely people do have urges. If you're doing nothing for too long, then people must surely have like an urge. Again, that word. Yeah. No, get up and do that. Go on, push it. But then I think you've got anxiety and low confidence and self-esteem issues that will stop people. But that can be tackled and overcome. That's self-belief.
See, I believe
that's not natural programming.
We're
most of the time.
I think we're free, but I don't think we have what you would term libertarian free will. So I could choose, what I'm going to have for dinner, for example, but to make a choice not to eat would be very difficult. It's a coercive process, so you don't have to engage in it. But if you don't, you're going to get promptings to try to make you do it, and if you ignore those, it's going to be uncomfortable. So it's certainly coercive, but you do ultimately have the freedom not to do that, I guess.
Maybe that's where like sort of depression comes from, because it's people resisting this urge. It's like, go out there, and people like to live in the comfort zone, understandably. But for us to learn and grow collectively and individually, it's good we have to jump in the deep end. We have to push ourselves. And I think when people live in fear and they don't do that, then that's when you can get into a circle of despair.
Well, I do like the more meta approach to depression. I think people like Carl Rogers and Jung talked about that, like the idea of alignment and somehow being out of alignment with somewhere that you should be. And so depression is, you're depressed because something isn't right.
Sounds perfect.
You're misaligned, and it's like, if you listen to your body when it's hungry, you have to eat, right? And just think along those lines. And if you're feeling like that, well, pay attention, like, what's that telling you? And now maybe you've just got a chemical imbalance, but very often it's something you could change something,
I love that metaphor. So you're out of line. So you're resisting, and you might have been doing that, so that's become natural habit now. That's become normal behaviour. And then you lose track of that, what even is the natural impulse. Yeah. Because it's just gone on, you've resisted it, you've rebelled your entire life. Yeah. So you could be in your 20s and you don't even know what it is anymore, so you're completely out of whack. But that's saying, right, that there is a point where you're supposed to be.
Absolutely. That's so promising, isn't it? That is so promising, because one of the most awful things about nihilistic depression is the wrestling and grappling with that idea that it's all ultimately meaningless. Even your depression is just a mishmash of chemicals that are kind of just doing what they're doing, and you're feeling that, but it's no ultimate meaning. But the fact that, well, maybe I'm like this because I'm not doing something I should be, implies that there is an ought, that there is a should. And that means that there really is some meaning and some purpose to it in an objective sense, not just subjectively. And there's nothing more promising than that.
Do you think that's true?
I think that's what the evidence seems to suggest.
I think that's true. I don't see any other way.
And that's kind of like a possible remedy to nihilism, and that's just absolutely amazing if you can think like that. It's so promising that you're not where you should be, and that means there is somewhere you should be. Therefore, what you're doing matters. Perhaps not just in the here and now, but in an ultimate sense. What more do you want to hear? You know, that's incredible.
And you get some artists, you know, and they'll come across this, you know, even like, you know, Paul McCartney, Let It Be.
Yeah.
If you just don't fight, just let it be,
Great
then
song.
you'll get into alignment. You know, and people touch upon this.
Yeah.
Say in art, in music, in philosophy.
You see it
in psychology,
everywhere. In religion.
Man, stand-up comedians.
Yeah.
People touch on it. When people know and they've discovered this, it's like saying, hey, everything's fine. Trust yourself. Be yourself.
It's manifesting itself in different ways, isn't it?
Jim, people have lost track of who they really are, because, like I said, they've rebelled for so long. And I think the hardest thing is getting back on track.
Yeah.
But it is possible.
The idea that there's more to us than meets the eye. And that's something that I think modern society has unfortunately done away with. Knowingly or unknowingly, it's just one of the consequences of becoming so material and scientific and reductionist. And look at societies that embrace those philosophies, you know, like the Soviet Union. It doesn't end well. We need this notion that there's more to us than that.
So what are you saying? You're saying society is more about, like, say, the economy, right?
You're a flesh and blood creature, and the consensus seems to be you're the accidental byproduct of nature, and so you serve no ultimate purpose than to be here, reproduce, and die. You're basically a biological machine, and people mock, people that have beliefs, but the idea that there's a spark of divinity in you in some sense seems essential to live a meaningful, productive life, ultimately. Because when the shit really does hit the fan, what foundation have you got to sustain you through that? If you just believe that you're absolutely insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Whereas if you have some underlying belief, that's really, it doesn't mean it's true, but God, it's really going to help you, isn't it?
We need that, man. We need that magic, that unknown, that mystery, that hope.
Yes, the magic.
Magic of life. Don't understand it. Because we can't comprehend it anyway.
No.
So, say nature, us being biological robots, just doing our normal thing, reproduce, eat, etc., sleep.
Yeah.
Well, say in society, it starts with education, right? And people in work, current day work, when they're working, say, 9 to 5, full-time work, they'll talk about themselves being a cog in the system.
Yeah.
So I think when we look at society and the economy like that, I think people can feel like they're just a cog, right? Yeah. So I don't even think, unfortunately, this isn't even encouraged, this beauty and the magic of the world. It's not even encouraged when we're young, through education. No. And of course, it's definitely not talked about in adult life until we've got podcasts like this, Dolphin. And other things like that. A lot of people are talking about this, but it's definitely not mainstream. It's not common knowledge. It's not commonly talked about or understood in this modern age. It should be, because this is why people are out of alignment. Yeah. Because we're not understanding our minds, our hearts. No. And we're not looking at the mystery and magic of life. We're brought up to study, get a good job, reproduce, get a good home, etc. Where's the creativity, love, and mystery in that?
And nothing I've said, I haven't meant any of it to be a criticism of science or of economics, because science can only deal with the material world. It's all it can do. And so I believe that science and whatever you want to call this, let's just call it religion or spirituality, they do belong to non-overlapping magisterium. You cannot derive this from science, so it's no criticism of science.
No, not at all. I've never.
Or of economics. We're just describing, how an economy works and how we should do it. So this has to come from somewhere else. We kind of have to.
This is individuals, man.
We can
do this ourselves.
This is why people had faith and they went to church. It's like, well, the government can't do this, and you're not going to learn it in the lab. It has to come from us, doesn't it?
Yeah, hope and spirit. It's understanding oneself.
The state, if you didn't have any money, would give you some benefits and a house to live in and some food. But it's kind of like, Christ said, well, man, he cannot live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So I'm not criticising the state, but it can't give you that. It's just going to provide for your needs, but that's it. this stuff is something that really has to come from the soul or from the heart, doesn't it?
But like as you started off talking, so just do like a full loop. You're talking about it maybe being like depressive because it's just like as long as you're surviving, as long as you wake up alive, the body's like keep going, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So this is where habits form, and normally it would be good to have a habit. Because it'd be like you're eating the same thing every day, you're surviving, you wake up alive.
I agree. A routine.
A routine.
Yeah.
But when bad habits form, that's the unfortunate thing. And people that aren't breaking out and being themselves, and they're not used to that, so they're in a comfort zone.
Yeah.
If you're in a comfort zone for too long, so that's a habit.
Yeah.
And that's a bad habit. But still, we're chemically programmed to keep doing it.
Yes.
Because we keep waking up. That's the unfortunate side of it.
Yeah.
That's where our consciousness can come in and be like, fuck this, override this.
Yeah.
But we have to override those chemical, biological reactions. Otherwise, we'll be doing the same shit every single day. And we'll feel unfulfilled because we're being uncreative.
And it could well be that routine you're in is very safe and it keeps you out of danger. You don't know what's around the corner or over the horizon, but you'll play it safe and stay where you are. That makes perfect sense. But yes, look at where it's, like you said, where it's going to leave you ultimately. So you cannot just look at the physical mechanics, the biological side of it. It's just not enough.
No.
But it's sufficient for explaining what we are.
It kind of needs to be there, but I think the point is getting the good habits formed.
Yeah.
And like I only heard yesterday or read yesterday, once you've got a habit, and you'll say a bad habit, and you want to change that, so you stop it, you need to replace it immediately with another habit.
Right.
So say you're going to stop smoking, every time you replace it with jogging or something, or replace it with, I don't know, eating, which a lot of people do, naturally.
Yeah.
If you're going to try and stop a bad habit, you need to replace it immediately.
Yeah.
So we are just habit bearing creatures.
Because you're wired to...
We're wired like that,
Yeah.
man. So I think it's...
that makes sense.
Let's just be our biological robots.
Yeah.
But try and have awareness of that, I suppose. I don't know, man. Just try and get into good habits. That's the best thing we can do. It's making use of us being biologically programmed robots.
And this started out somewhat, depressing and cynical and skeptical, but I guess the ultimate point is that as my thinking changed, I realised there had to be another dimension that came into my way of thinking, how I looked at it, and I was only looking at it from the reductionist approach. And damn right, that's going to be depressing. I can't really... nothing I observed or said I could really argue with. It was all pretty factual, but... if you just limit yourself to that way, then it's going to be very depressing. Yeah, and so as I've gone on and I thought, science is simply describing the way it works and what happens. It's like somebody once said, I think it was Alistair McGrath, he's a good guy to look up, but he said, I can boil the kettle and I can explain that with two different approaches, and this is what I like. The scientific approach and maybe the spiritual approach. And the scientific approach can tell me, well, I've switched it on and the electrical current is doing its thing and the temperature's rising, and it can explain all the scientific processes of why the water's getting to 100 degrees. But then I can look at it and say, or I can explain it by saying, well, the reason the kettle's done that is because I wanted a cup of tea. And you can look at the universe in the same way. You can explain all the mechanics of it, but it tells you nothing about meaning or purpose. That's a different realm altogether. Yeah.
It's all perspective, I suppose, right?
It's perspective. But what I'm saying is you could do that with the kettle. The scientific way of looking at it isn't going to tell you anything meaningful about it. It's just going to describe the mechanics. Saying James wanted a cup of tea, well, now you're going beyond the science then. You're talking about the real purpose behind it, So the reductionist approach does limit us in that way, but describes what we see perfectly. So, good stuff.
Yeah, amazing stuff, man.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe don't be so angry at the robot slave thing, because hopefully it's all playing a part in some ultimate process.